Good evening, viewers and listeners. Welcome to another program, Serving the People, brought to you by the Democratic Republican Party, the DRP. I'm your host and founder and leader of this party, Mrs. Anissa Batiste. Now please let us start with a word of prayer. Loving Father in heaven, do bless our viewers and listeners that they may understand what is explained to them today concerning the Democratic Republican Party, and that they may be inspired to support this good philosophy of governance in order to preserve and protect our society as a free one. In Jesus' name I pray with thanksgiving. Amen. And now, viewers, listeners, remember that if you wish to contact us at this program, you may call the number that's on your screen right now. It is 528-1015. That's 528-1015. In this evening's program, I want us to discuss the name of this party. Democratic Republican Party. That's what we're going to talk about. Democratic Republican Party. It is necessary for me to give you more information and to explain further the meaning of our name and to debunk some of the false information that has been out there about the name of the party. First of all, I need you to understand, my dear people, that the name Democratic Republican Party is not new in the world, and the name Democratic Republican Party is no confusion. There are some who are saying that Anissa Batiste and her party is confused because they are trying to join the Democrats and the Republicans. And in the United States of America today, the Democrats is one party and the Republicans is another party. And some have said it is foolish to have a party called Democratic Republican. First thing I need you to understand, my dear people, is that it is not true that it is foolish to have such a name of a party. It is not the first party in the whole world, political party, that has borne that name, Democratic Republican Party. Thirdly, it has nothing to do with the division between the Democrats in America and the Republicans. And in fact, there are countries around the world that have the name in their country name Democratic Republican or Democratic Republic. But let me take it one step at a time. Let me make it absolutely clear that the Democratic Republican Party of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has nothing to do with the division between the Democrats and the Republicans in America. That is completely different. I also have to explain to you in a little way what really is the system of government in America. Because even though today we know that there is a Democrats Party and the Republicans Party, as we call them, you need to understand that America, the United States of America's system of government, is that of a republic. Yes, if you read the United States Constitution, you would see that it is called the Republic of United States of America. In other words, whether or not you have a president in America who comes from the Democrats Party or the Republican Party, they are governing over the Republic of the United States. Yes, so don't fool yourselves. Republic or Republicanism, which is the philosophy from which we get the name Republic or Democratic Republican Party, Republicanism is more than just a party name. It is a philosophy of government, and we will explain to you what philosophy of government it is. But let me just point out something to you about history. And I am reading to you from a website called princeton.edu. Princeton is a university, .edu. And it defines Democratic Republican Party. And it says, quote, "The Democratic Republican Party or Republican Party was an American political party founded in the early 1790s by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison." End of quote. Did you hear that? We are told that in the early 1790s, that's hundreds of years ago, the Democratic Republican Party was the name of an American political party that was founded by two former presidents of the United States, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. In another source, Wikipedia, it says, in United States history, the Democratic Republican Party, or the Jeffersonian Republicans, was a political party organized by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in 1791 to 1793, which opposed the Federalist Party and controlled the presidency and Congress and most states from 1801 to 1825 during the first party system. I end there, end of quote. So we are told that historically there was such a thing as the Democratic Republican Party, namely in the United States history, and this party, these people were also known as Jeffersonian Republics, and the party was organized by former President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, and also another former President, James Madison, in the period 1791 to 1793. And at the time, they opposed what was known as the Federalist Party, and they controlled the presidency and the Congress for a long time, from the period 1801 to 1825. So it is not a new thing when you hear Democratic Republican Party. As a matter of fact, the very first political party that existed in the United States in 1790s was called the Democratic Republican Party. Yes, my dear people, this is the historical truth and fact. So let nobody come and tell you, oh, forget about Miss Batiste and her craziness, because you can't put Democrats and Republicans together, because her party is called Democratic Republican. That is nonsense. The Democrats and the Republicans are separate in America. You stop them and you say no. Historically, the first party in America was called Democratic Republican, and it had nothing to do with the split that exists today of the Democrats Party and the Republicans Party. It had to do with a philosophy of governance upon which founding fathers of the United States of America and its Constitution based the government of America. In other words, the governmental philosophy upon which the United States was based when it was founded was, in fact, republicanism. And democracy was the method of electing persons that they used to get people into government, where you had people voting, and those who got the majority votes would form government. That is all democracy means. I want you to take a look at this clip, which explains the difference between democracy and republic, for you to understand the form of government that republicanism is. Take a look and understand the difference between democracy and republic or republicanism. Take a look.
The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone.
Yes, my dear viewers, you would hear that democracy has to do with majority rule. So it is a good scientific method to use, to elect, to decide who should govern. You let all the people who are eligible to vote, vote, and those who get the majority votes must rule. Majority rule, democracy. However, when they are ruling, should they only rule based on what majority wants? Or should they rule based on the law and its protection for not just majority, not just minority, but protection of the rights and freedoms of all. That is what republic or republicanism stood for. The rule of law, the public thing, the rule of law. And the rule of law guarantees protection for the rights and freedoms of all of the people, not giving the majority what they want in rulership to the expense or the hurt of the minority, for example. So, take a look at this next clip that shows you the practical, in a very practical way, it shows you the danger of using democracy as a form of rulership. Remember, we said it is okay if you use it to determine who should rule. But when they are ruling, how should they rule? Should they only rule to give the majority what they want at the expense of the minority? No. Rulership or governance should be on the basis of protection of the inalienable rights and freedoms of all. The rule of law. So take a look at this practical example explaining the situation of the gunman and the majority who is running him down. Take a look.
America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the founding fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35 to 1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35 to 1 to hang him. But the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous or he goes free. The rights of the gunman aren't subject to majority rule, but to the law. This is the essence of a republic.
Yes, my dear people, I hope you understand from that how dangerous it would be if only what the majority wants would be done while ruling. Because suppose the majority decides that they want to take away the rights of the minority. If you govern based on majority rule, then you would have to take away the rights of the minority. But if you govern based on republicanism, which says the rule of law, then by law, all have rights, majority and minority, and you would have to rule based on what is correct for the protection of the rights and freedoms of all, majority and minority. And therefore, in a republic or under republicanism, the gunman would have a fair trial, despite the fact that a majority wanted to see him hang. I hope you understand very importantly or very well the importance of this. And therefore, this is why the United States of America, despite having different parties developing over the years, and we come down to the point where you have the Democrats and the Republicans, their formation was that of a republic that is supposed to protect the rights and freedoms of all of the people, which rights and freedoms come from God. Listen to this third clip that explains why the founding fathers of America saw the importance of having a rulership or a governance based on the philosophy of republicanism, which is protection for the rights and freedoms of all by the rule of law, and not a rulership or governance that is based on majority rule. Take a look at this third clip.
Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law and in effect built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
Yes, my dear viewers, do you see? It was important for them to have what you call a republic which limits government's power and leaves the people free to produce and free to develop and have initiative and to be innovative, and not having government that has too much powers, excessive powers, that could be to the detriment of the people's exercise of their rights and freedoms which come from God. So it was a system which would be based upon a fixed body of law that is not subject to the whims and fancies of a majority or an elite minority, for example. And we see that the essence of freedom in a republic is the proper limitation of government, because whenever government power grows, the people's freedoms recedes. So my dear people, what are we saying here? We are talking about the values of republicanism, that you could understand why the Democratic Republican Party of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, started by me, is the way it is with its name. We are not confused at all. We are saying we need to have government that respects the inalienable rights and freedoms of the people. And this is what republicanism stands for. Let me read something to you. I'm reading again from Wikipedia. This is what it says about republicanism. Republicanism is a political values system. Did you hear that? It's a political values system that has been a major part of American civic thought since the American Revolution. It stresses, listen to what republicanism stresses, listen to what the word Republican in the name Democratic Republican Party stresses. It stresses liberty and unalienable rights as central values. It makes the people as a whole sovereign. It rejects aristocracy and inherited political power. It expects citizens to be independent in their performance of civic duties, and it vilifies corruption. End of quote. Did you hear that? So listen to the beautiful values of republicanism. Being a democratic republican is about being somebody who believes in stressing or emphasizing liberty of all of the people. Being a democratic republican is about being somebody who believes in stressing or emphasizing unalienable or inalienable rights. Being a democratic republican is being someone who believes that the people are their sovereign rulers. The government is just given power by the people. We hire them when we vote for them to work for us in our service, but we are our sovereign rulers, the people. Yes, my dear people. And the government is they're just borrowing the opportunity from the people through their votes to serve them, to work for them. And the people rule. That is why the people could vote them out when election time comes. That is what republicanism believes. It also believes that the people, the citizens, must be independent in their performance of their civic duties. It is against inherited political power. So nobody must come and behave like a king to us and tell us, well, after me, my son must rule. No, the people will decide if your son will rule after you or daughter or not, because the people are their sovereign rulers. And republicanism vilifies or rejects corruption. So when we say we are democratic republicans, we are saying that we are against corruption. This is what republicanism is. But let us talk some more about inalienable rights, because we're told republicanism stresses liberty and inalienable rights. What do we mean when we say rights are inalienable? We mean, my dear people, that rights do not come from man. Rights do not come from the stroke of a pen in the parliament, that you could write a law to give a right or write a law to take it away. No. Rights do not come from government. Rights do not come from nature, but they come from God. As the 35th President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, once said, and I quote, he said, "The rights of man do not come from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God." End of quote. Did you see that? So, republicanism believes that the rights of the people are inalienable, meaning they come from God. And the government simply has a duty to protect those rights, not to manage them and give and take them as they please, as if they are God and as if they gave them to begin with. So republicanism speaks against government trying to treat your rights and freedoms as if they are God to you, as if they gave those rights and freedoms to you. That is what it means when we say we are democratic republicans. Also, republicanism believes that the rights and freedoms of the people are inviolable. What do we mean by inviolable? It simply means they are not to be violated. Yes, we know there are certain instances where government, under God's authority, could deny people certain rights and freedoms. For example, you have the freedom of expression, but if you use your expression to publish lies against a person, you could be sued in defamation. Because even though you have freedom of speech and freedom to publish, freedom of expression, you are not free to damage a person's reputation. If you cross that limit, then your freedom would be denied in some way by maybe you having to pay a fine, for example. So your money or your property would be taken from you as a fine because you have crossed the limit of your freedom of expression. And that is okay. But by and large, rights and freedoms are inviolable. They are not to be violated by government. Government is not above the law, but they must respect rights and freedoms because they come from God. And how government treats the rights and freedoms of the people is how they are treating God, who gave those rights and freedoms. Yes, my dear people. So let us summarize some principles that republicanism stands for, thereby helping you to understand what the Democratic Republican Party stands for. Point number one, republicanism stands for rights and freedoms possession. We are teaching the people that they possess rights and freedoms. Point number two, equal protection of all under law. Yes, because all possess rights and freedoms, then all must be equally protected under the law. Three, freedom from tyranny. Because republicanism is against government managing your rights and freedoms how they please and doing what they want, even to take them away, which would be tyranny. So republicanism, by stressing your rights and freedoms come from God, we stress freedom from tyranny. Point number four, security for majorities as well as minorities. You see, republicanism says we must not use majority rule to govern, because if you do that, only the majority would have security and the minority wouldn't have any. But republicanism says security for all, security for both majorities as well as minorities. Point number five, the importance and self-determination of the individual. Because rights and freedoms are individual rights and freedoms given to each human being by God, then republicanism stresses the importance of individual self-determination. Is that understood, my dear people? Yes. And point number six, republicanism, democratic republican values, stresses freedom of the individual. Don't come and tell me you have to take away an individual rights in order to protect the collective majority. No. When you hurt individual rights, you hurt the rights of all. Therefore, republicanism stresses freedom of the individual. And point number seven, republicanism stresses the rule of law. The rule of law, which sustains the system. Because once there is the rule of law, then nobody is above the law, no government is above the law, no politician is above the law because he's a politician, no minister of government is above the law because he has a high position, okay? It means even the vagrant has as much rights and freedoms as the prime minister. So if the vagrant brings a claim against the prime minister in the court, he's not to be treated differently because it is the prime minister, because nobody is above the law, because Democratic Republican Party stands for republicanism, which stresses the rule of law. And that sustains the system by ensuring all are treated equally under law. These are the beautiful values for which the Democratic Republican Party stands, my dear people. And we want you to understand them, because this is the truth. Don't let anybody come and tell you otherwise. Tell them, I listened to the leader of the Democratic Republican Party explain to us what republicanism is and what democracy is and how Democratic Republican go together. Again, we believe in democracy as a method of electing people to govern. But after we use majority rule to decide who should govern or who should rule, when they are ruling, they must not rule based on majority rule and what majority wants alone. They must rule based on the rule of law, which protects the rights and freedoms of all, both majority and minority. This is the end of our program. I am happy we could explain these things to you. We love you. We want you to know the truth. And we want you to know that a democratic republican philosophy of government is the best for our system because it stresses the protection of individual, inalienable or God-given rights and freedoms, not just for some, but for all. Remember, if you wish to contact us, the number on your screen, 528-1015. That's 528-1015. You can join the DRP. You can get a membership form. We welcome you. We have wonderful values that will strengthen our society and make us free. Until our next program, may God bless you.